So, Rob, Justin Trudeau obviously lost his majority government. What challenges does he face right away?
Well, let's give him the good news first. He's still Prime Minister. A couple of weeks ago, that was an open question. But what is he facing? He's facing a divided country and an inflamed electorate with an enfeebled mandate, and those are real challenges. His first priority is to deal with the anger in the energy-producing section of the country. He has no representation in Alberta and Saskatchewan. I think they're already talking about what they need to do immediately to deal with that problem. They need to bring somebody into their office who knows Western Canada. It could be somebody from the energy sector, and B, into their government to represent that sector. And that'll be a challenge. Let me be mischievous, because I'm mischievous. I do have I know it's going to be hard for you to believe, Andrew, but an impish side to my character. And I would say, if I were them, they've always had a very good relationship with Rachel Notley. I might talk to Rachel Notley. But I would also think about bringing in an energy executive, somebody who knows the business, into their government as well. He also faces...
Sorry, Rob, when you say that, you mean appoint her to the Senate and make her a cabinet minister? Is that kind of what you mean?
That might be one path of doing it. That's a path. Look, he's also facing resurgent nationalism in the province of Quebec. Now, I want people to understand that doesn't mean that there's an increased support for independence, but he is now going to have to face the prospect of increasing nationalism. Bill 21 will be an issue. It's really, if I were looking for a primary interlocutor, I would be cozying up to Premier Legault right now, who in many ways is pulling the strings, even for the Bloc. He's the most popular politician, maybe in the country right now, and he has a challenge there. He has a challenge internationally. He's going to have to go to the ASEAN and APEC conferences in the next few weeks and meet with President Trump, who has NAFTA still to deal with, and with President Xi, who's got a couple of Canadians. Challenges there. The most important challenge, not the most important, but a nagging political challenge that he's going to have to face is SNC-Lavalin is not going to go away. Liberals will no longer have majorities on committees. There may be inquiries. There may be a call for a judicial inquiry. That will be a problem for him as well, I would suggest.
You know, I remember many prime ministers, whether conservative or liberal, say the number one concern of a Canadian prime minister is national unity. And national unity, you know, I mean, maybe a lot of people did see this coming, but I don't think 4 years ago we could see some of the national unity concerns, if you're a Canadian prime minister, are back. Right, the Bloc is back, and Western alienation is back. I mean, these are things that this country went through a generation ago, and now it seems to be back.
Yeah, there are real strains on the fabric of the country, without a doubt. There is great frustration in Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular. Their economy has been hobbled, and they don't feel like people paid attention to that during the campaign. And had it been a manufacturing or a high-tech sector in the province of Quebec or Ontario that had been hit that hard, those people would have gotten more attention. That's the feeling. And look, nationalism is on the rise in Quebec. Again, not independence, but a Quebec-first agenda is very much the order of the day in Quebec City under Premier Legault. And Justin Trudeau is going to have to try and keep that fabric from tearing apart and causing him triggering a national unity crisis.
And what about Andrew Scheer? What's next for him?
Well, look, let's give him the good news as well. First of all, he was facing this kind of gale force headwind of history. Nobody had defeated a majority-mandated prime minister after one term since R.B. Bennett some almost 85 years ago. It was always going to be tough for him. Good news, he won the popular vote. He's coming back to Ottawa with almost 24 more MPs. But here's the bad news. Canadians didn't really know him at the beginning of this campaign, and when they got to know him, they weren't quite sure they liked what he saw. I think what you saw last night in his speech when he mentioned Stephen Harper losing in 2004 and coming back to win 2 years later was the beginning of his campaign to keep his job, because he will face calls for him to step down. There will be elements of the party that are very disappointed this morning and thought this was ripe for the taking, and he didn't cross the finish line. There is an automatic leadership review after an election campaign where the leader loses, and he's going to have to deal with that in the next few months. So he's got his challenges as well.
He can also say, though, as he did last night, the Conservatives did win the popular vote.
They did.
That doesn't matter in a way in our system in terms of seats, but it could be seen as a moral victory of some sort. Let me ask you, we're going to hear from next Yves-François Blanchet as well as Andrew Scheer. Rob, we saw the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, at the Jerry Metro station in Papineau in Montreal, but we're not going to hear from him until tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Is that struck me as just a little bit unusual. Usually we hear from the leaders the next day, but I don't necessarily want to make too much out of that. Do we know anything about why that is?
No, but they know that they have immediate challenges and priorities. Western Canada is one of them, and they need to tackle that. I think that they're thinking about that right now as we speak. They are talking about what are they going to do to get that representation around the Prime Minister in his office and in the government, an immediate priority. So they're going to take their time.
Let's talk about how this country, what it will look like in terms of where it is, in terms of some policies, right? I mean, you've got a minority government. If you're going to kind of borrow support, presumably you're not going to get support from the Conservatives unless it might be on some energy issues. You never know, right? But on some other things, you're going to have to ask the NDP or the Bloc for support. So what could that look like in terms of perhaps pharmacare, in terms of some of the NDP policies, or when issues specific around Quebec?
Look to 1972 for an example. And I know a lot of people think that I was there when Sir John A. was elected. I wasn't. I wasn't there in 72 either. But there are real examples there of how Pierre Trudeau the elder, actually co-opted the NDP, took a lot of their policies, nationalization of Petro-Canada, a whole bunch of things like that come to mind, and made them their own. Ended up sidelining the NDP and winning a majority mandate 2 years later. So Jagmeet Singh has to be very, very careful. Yes, obviously a potential dance partner for Trudeau, but he's got to be careful. There is an opportunity, though, for Jagmeet Singh now as well. He has lost his power base. His power base used to be in the province of Quebec. That's no longer the case. Looks like it's shifting westward to some of the traditional power bases that the NDP has had in the past. But that frees him up on something like Bill 21. He no longer has to worry about losing any significant support there, and he can now be free to attack that, and that might be an opportunity for him.
All right, Rob, so interesting. You do not look like you were around when Sir John A. Macdonald was around.
That's kind of you,
for
Andrew.
the record. CBC's Ottawa Bureau Chief, Rob Russo.